Hey, welcome back to Niddy's Bonsai and the long-awaited spring tour. So first up is Dad's old sycamore. Now this is featured in a few videos. Now I guess the real hardline bonsai enthusiasts will snub at the idea of having a sycamore as a bonsai, but this is a very sentimental tree to me, something that I had collected as a seedling from a gardening job as a youngster, probably some 30 years ago. And out of the tens of dozens I brought back, Dad decided to bonsai this one sycamore. So we're stuck with it today, and having lost me dad, 18 months or so ago, the tree's ever so more important than ever, really. It was something I was trying to fix from a disaster me and my brothers had when we were younger, with some building materials that had fell on this tree and quite rightly upset Dad quite a bit. Because from my childhood memories of this tree, it actually did look quite good, what he had done. But it got snapped in half and kind of got neglected and chucked to the back of the rockery in a pot and just about given enough water and food to live, really. So then around, I'd say 5 years ago, after many years of neglect, I kind of tried to turn this tree around a bit. Mostly regrowing a new leader, trying to make that look convincing, repairing some of the roots where, like I say, it had been in a bad soil really and just sat in a pot neglected. A lot of the roots he had done like a root over rock style on a lump of granite, which did look really nice. A lot of those had died away. So it was kind of just get it back to kind of, what's alive, what's usable, create a new leader, and then just see if we can develop anything from there. And like I say, the top's come on quite a bit. The leader obviously has been developed. I think the tree's a little bit tall, but because of the size of the leaf, this tree will have to be quite big in the end. So I think, at some point I need to grow some big sacrifice branches now and really, really just pull some sap through this thing and try and bulk it up a bit. Last year I added some root grafts to the bottom there. You can see, I think there's about 5 left on there. I'd done probably about 8 or something on there. A couple died away because they were done quite late into the spring. Even in a bed of sphagnum moss, a few withered away. But I think I've got 5 there that have taken really well. I've removed the pins that are holding them in. And I'm just going to grow the tops of these now for a little while. And then just, cut them off, I guess. I don't know when the optimum time is to cut off root grafts. But they seem like they've fused. And, I don't want them growing too vigorously. So I will nip them off soon. I've had a good shoot from the bottom just pop up as well in an ideal kind of place, right on a little bend, and it's on the outside of the bend. So I'll be thickening that up, and maybe as it thickens up I'll also turn a bit round and get ready to maybe actually do an approach graft or a thread graft through the main trunk and add another branch where we want it. Although the root layers look like they could actually be great to do that with, the leaves are actually slightly different. This sycamore come from a village, I don't know, 5-6 miles away from my house. These sycamores come from just round the corner, the ones at the bottom being used for root grafts, and you can see they've all got slightly different leaves. Even if they're only subtle, you can have a branch looking like that. So any thread grafts I do take will be taken from the main tree itself, but like I say, this new branch that we're developing lower down is going to provide some brilliant opportunities for that. So maybe we'll get 2 or 3 branches off of that one and keep the remaining of the branch as well. So some really positive steps forward with this tree, really. Like I say, I'm going to keep cutting the top back and just practicing with it, whether some of them branches get reduced right back in the end. Last year I actually spent a little bit of time just sort of equalising the thickness of those branches. So, one at the top was slightly thicker than, say, the bottom one that I've got there. So I was just conscious of, right, I'll let one grow out a bit more and cut the other one back. And I've kind of got them in some kind of order now. The bottom branch, like I say, that we're growing on, probably take a season or 2 to catch up to the thickness of those others. It depends how vigorous it grows this year, and if it really does start pushing out, might only take a year or so. There's a nasty cut to one side of it, obviously featured in a few of the other videos over the years on my YouTube channel. As you can see as well, that's healing quite well. I like I say, I put a 2-part filler in that last year. Just kind of moulded it to where I wanted it and crafted it back with a Dremel. Just put a little bit of a dark paint over it to hide it, and that's growing in now, so that will never rot out any further. And there's also a few larger wounds down from where I tried in my younger days, just grafting bits onto this tree. This tree has been through the absolute mill, if I'm honest. But it will look like an ancient old gnarly thing one day. But like I say, the last couple of years I put a lot of effort into it, and I was trying to U-turn it a little bit with Dad's poor health just so he could kind of see it restored. But I feel like he's probably just missed the boat by a year or two on it, which is a real shame. But I will continue this project, and maybe one day find someone else to look after it. So next up is this beautiful little Japanese white pine. I imported this tree from Germany. I say imported, but I just purchased it through an eBay purchase, and obviously the guy sent it to me, but I guess it was imported in a way. But cracking little tree. This has been a fantastic learning curve for me, to be honest. It's been in my care now this will be the third spring and the third season, I guess, of looking after it. Although quite a mature tree when I got it, movement in the right place in the trunk, branches in the right place as well. The leader area got a bit coarse. The first branch as well, towards the end of that, had got a bit coarse. And just in general as well, the refinement wasn't in it. All the branches are kind of lifted back up, sprung up if you like, and pushed the foliage up. It had a bit of a moppy kind of look to it. But, over the last couple of years, I've wired a lot of the finer branching back down, kept on top of pinching candles when they've been quite coarse, and then just pruning the tree later in the year. And keeping to that simple maintenance routine of just pinching the odd candle in spring and pruning back in autumn has kept the tree rather compact. And I say the new buds and candles when they break in spring are quite equal across the board. So I'd say the tree's fairly well balanced, really. So this spring I added some guide wires there just to pull down some of the thicker branches, just to add a little character to them, and also just to open up that tree a little bit, get a bit more light into the inner branches, promote more back budding if we can. Like I say, try and reveal a little bit more trunk and just add a little bit more character to the tree. I think at some point, if the vigour in this carries on, I might look to take out a few little branches up by the top there, just to reveal a little bit more trunk. It still looks quite heavy on the foliage, but to take something so mature already, and not far off a novice as myself, I'm a kind of have-a-go hero. I've taught myself, and like most of you watching my videos probably, you look to other people's videos for what worked and what didn't work, and read the rest. But in the end, as with anything, it comes down to having a go, and you could be good at reading it and taking it in, but you've still got to practice what you've preached. But I feel to have took a mature tree, needed some refinement, and 3 years on to have something, in my opinion, that looks better than I started, I'm quite pleased with that, really. And I feel as long as it never dries out, or we don't miss no pruning or nothing crazy, or it gets ill, it can only get better now, really. So yeah, quite looking forward to the future for this tree, and progressing it along its journey further. And I hope over the years of me kind of fixing it up and carrying on with it, that trunk will sort itself out a little bit down the bottom there. I think probably next year, probably look to repot it. It'll be the fourth year I've had it, and it didn't look like it had been recently repotted. Or come next year, sorry, it will be the fourth year I've had it, but it didn't look like it was recently repotted when I purchased it. So we could say it's probably going to be about 5 years. So I think it will be due a repot next year, and could make an interesting video. Okay, so from a bit of a showstopper pine to a bit of a weedy looking pine, but this is probably about 6 years old, to be honest. This is a Scots pine, and it's probably going to take on a bit of a literati style, but to be honest with you, it might just be a natural looking pine by the time I'm kind of done with it. The branch is actually in quite nice places now. It was a bit questionable last year. I was a bit undecided whether I could do anything with it, but I managed to get some nice movement into the trunk, just subtle little bends and little curves. Managed to get some branches where I think they're very, very much usable, maybe a little bit more bend on a few of them at some point, but looking very healthy. It's actually in a concrete pot that I made. If you've seen the Hawthorn video from last year, I was tempted to put the Hawthorn into this pot, and I'm glad I didn't, because it would have been too small, to be honest. But I've just popped this pine in there for now, because it's actually got plenty of room to grow for a pine, to be honest. And I don't want this thing getting hugely chunky, and it's bulking up just fine as it is. But no, doing really well. Not much to look at the moment, but I can see progression there. We've got branches in the right place again. We've got buds forming back on them branches. You know, it's starting to take some kind of shape. The back budding's been phenomenal on this little tree, to be honest with you. The first couple of years of having it, it kind of grew in a weeping habit, and that's kind of why I collected this. It was from a gardening job, local. We're split into like kind of two areas where I live. One end of the village is clay and sort of heavy old soil, and then the far end of the village is sandy woodland. And things like these pines, you know, grow prolifically in gardens, and if you can avoid them long enough to get to a good size and then collect them, you know, it's quite handy to have a glut of all this stuff, really. But this is one I collected because it looked like a bit of a weeping kind of pine, which does occur in nature, I think on a rare occasion. But some people have selected some of that growth, obviously, and grafted it onto other trees over the years. So I think you can get a true weeping Scots pine. But eventually, you know, after a few years and good soil and good feed, it started actually growing, you know, a decent leader and sort of taking an upright form. And I kind of left it for a couple of years, and it got to a point where I thought, you know, a few of these branches have got a bit thick, it's getting a bit knotty on the trunk, or I don't know about this, you know, might have neglected, well, not neglected it, but overgrown it, you know, before working it, kind of thing. It would still make a fine tree, obviously. But no, I kind of U-turned it, and now I'm really quite happy with it. And I see, you know, a good future for this tree, and maybe something quite convincing. The wire on there is just beginning to bite. I'll probably will take it off before it marks it too much. I don't want it getting knotty and sort of, you know, little inverse bits and stuff up there for no reason. This could be quite a nice, just natural bark tree, really. But no, moving in the right direction again. And I think, yeah, you know, by the end of the year, we should have a bit more foliage on it, really. I've snapped some of the candles on the thicker branches at the top. There is one section where I've left unchecked, and I noticed it's actually thickening up quite dramatically. I'm not sure the wire was actually biting throughout the winter at all, so I think most of that's happened in spring. You know, just with the life of the tree kind of waking up, it's just started to bite in. But no, just reduced a few candles, like I say, and the rest of it I'll let break out as normal. Some of the lower branches I definitely want to thicken up a little bit. And then in autumn we can clip them back and maybe apply some more wire to it. If not, maybe I'll do something in summer. But no, very happy with that one. So that brings us on to this hawthorn. Now this is a collected tree. Well, it was just a stump, basically, I got from a hedge on a golf course that we were disbanding. I'd say probably 5 years ago now, so it's probably where it should be for where, you know, for a collected stump, and we had to grow a new leader and all, you know, branches and all that. The roots have got a little bit to be desired yet, but that can be worked on. I've put a tourniquet wire on there, and we'll see how that's gone in maybe another year or so. It's got quite a big pot, so I'm not in a rush to repot this one. But viewers that have been following the channel for a little while now would have seen this tree featured a few times, and last year we done a video solely devoted to it. I was going to actually pot it into the pot that we've just seen that Scots pine in, that concrete pot that I made, but thought better of it, and quite rightly, I think it still needed a little bit more time just to develop them roots to a good, you know, good thickness, really. It's okay putting it in a small pot. We might get some new roots around the base, but we'll never really get them in keep with the rest of the tree. So I've decided to keep it in this cut down nursery bucket for now. But in the video last spring, well worth a little nosy if you haven't seen it already, we basically cut back some coarser growth, kind of wired down some branches, sort of had a general critique of the tree. You know, there's a few little faults here and there on it, really, but for a first collected tree that I've actually managed to turn into a somewhat creditable bonsai, which most people who see really, you know, enjoy this tree and comment on it. I think we're getting somewhere with it now. So there's a few little branches up the top here that haven't really maybe got as much character and movement as I'd like in there, but you know, with time and aging of the bark and cutting back little sacrifice branches and things, then maybe we can actually create that kind of interest. You know, it doesn't have to be all twisty and bendy, does it? And if not, you know, hawthorns aren't a problem. We can cut a branch off and grow another one back. But this year already, I've cut back the coarser stuff on top just to keep it in check. As with all trees, they're, you know, normally more dominant in the apex. Some of the lower branches that I want to thicken up a little bit more, just wired out basically some of the new growth, put a bit of character into it. Whether that's going to be a mistake, because the rest of the tree isn't so, you know, attentively wired, shall I say, you know, it stand to be seen. But I'm only really looking for maybe 2 nodes worth or 2 leaf, you know, of each branch there. So a lot of it will be getting cut back again. But no, really coming on really well. I'd say it's almost, you know, thickened out double already this year. So yeah, really, you know, enjoying this one and enjoying working on it. And again, it can only really get better now. For those again who have been following the channel a while, will probably recognise this one. Now this is quite I'd say undeveloped in its journey to bonsai, but quite a developed stump. It's probably 35 years old now, to be fair. This was a cutting that my dad did of a forsythia. Grew it as a standard kind of topiary tree for years. It sounds a bit odd, but it did actually make a really good standard, to be fair. And in spring, it looked stunning. Much like it did this spring, it looked absolutely amazing. As I say, for, you know, bonsai qualities at the moment, it has very little. But it did look really good in its spring colour, loads of flowers. Basically just need to really thicken out some more branches off of this now and create like a little dome shaped like stump. You know, there's not much more I can really do with this. It isn't really going to have much of a direction in shape. I think just kind of going back for this kind of clipped back little dome of yellow flowers on a big stump is probably all we can do with it. But this year I've just basically just wired out a few branches, not to bend them around, just really just to push them out the way and you know, and get them kind of in the direction that we want. This tree would have been a lot further along its journey if we hadn't have tried to take that huge air layer. But like I say, it was a success in the end, so it was worth the wait. And I now have 2 large chunks of forsythia. Removing that air layer did feature in its own video last year, but I must say this base that you're looking at here, this original stump, this featured in my first ever YouTube video, so that's kind of where Nellie's Bonsai started for us. Now these two are quite an interesting pair. These are Acer platanoides, or Norway Maple. Again, a bit like the sycamore really, a bit, you know, of an acquired taste, I guess. They've got a really nice leaf, but they are a little bit big. Although these have come down in size quite dramatically, and I'm not really trying yet, so it does give me hope with, you know, greater ramification of a more restrictive pot. Although they don't like too shallow a pot, probably a bit like a pyracantha, you tend to get a bit of leaf scorch and a little bit of unhappiness if they're in too shallow a planter. But this pair here I've had for probably over 10 years. I had them from little tiny saplings, really, you know, too small to really to have started with. You probably could have started with pencil size thicknesses, where these were probably more like I don't know, you know, first or second year saplings, to be honest. But I've had them for a long time, again just collected from a gardening job. Now I'd say the first sort of I don't know, 20 centimetres or so of trunk is really nice, and there's some really great root base here. It's beginning to buttress out at the bottom, you know, roots around probably 70% of the front of each of these, so they're, you know, a little bit of scope for improvement, but majority of it from the front of what would be the chosen front at this point. Looks really nice, so it's just really the tops to work on. But the last couple of years I've really worked on just kind of just, you know, thickening these up a little bit, not incredibly quick. You know, they could go in a bigger container, but as a youngster I kind of experimented with these trees. You know, they given them quite a hard life, to be honest. One year I think I overfed them and nearly killed them, to be honest. You know, and the last 5 years, like all my trees, I've really refined what I'm doing, you know, and it's really paying off. They're moving leaps and bounds, really. I think these have got quite a bit of room to grow, but, you know, if I want to bulk them up any quicker, I'll probably have to go back into a bigger pot, really. But anything lower branch wise, I've been just clipping back, keeping it, you know, growing slowly and, you know, keeping it kind of usable. Out of the two, these were basically identical seedlings. As they've grown on and got older, one's got a bit of a bronzy tone to it in spring, as you can see here, and the other one's a much lighter green or a brighter green. But and the leaves as well. You know, I'd say the lighter green one's a little bit more kind of sharp and kind of like little points to the leaves, a bit more so, where the bronze one here is a bit more rounded off. I don't know if that's the best explanation of it, but at the very top of the vigorous growth, it becomes quite obvious. But no, like I say, the first 20 centimetres or so of trunk I'm quite happy with, but you know, the rest of it's got a bit lost. There's some bad cuts up on this second one, you know, the lighter green one, where I'll probably have to reduce it down to sort of halfway at some point. But it will just build, you know, more character in the trees. I think I've said in previous videos where we've gone over this pair, maybe for the repotting, and you know, they featured throughout, you know, the years over the years on the channel. But because of the slow method in which that they have been grown, the bark at the bottom is actually really fantastic, and like, you know, it's almost looking like a sort of a really aged tree already. So I think yeah, we're on the right path again with those. Just need to pick up the pace a bit, get them a bit thicker, I think. Stop mucking around with them now. So next up, we're going back to complete basics, as it were. A very, you know, immature tree. This featured in a short last year, and I believe this was a seedling from another short 2 years back. This is a crabapple, if you're not familiar with it. Like I say, featured in a couple of little shorts. One growing the seed, second one putting some movement into this. I've got another crabapple that also featured in a short, which really has bulked up well now. It really is moving, that tree. That will feature in another segment of this tour video. I'm going to obviously break it up into a few segments, because it's just going to be too long, and you know, I understand people haven't got these are going to be probably half an hour, but they haven't got, you know, maybe half an hour spare. So you know, I'm going to break it up, because I want to try and cover trees best I can, and I haven't featured in a video myself for quite a while, because I've not really felt up to it with the last couple of years. You know, that's not a cop out. I just haven't had the motivation and the confidence, shall we say, more than motivation. The motivation is always there, but it's kind of the confidence to pick up the camera and get on with it. You know, working on the trees I have no issue with, but sometimes filming it, you know, it can be the difference between getting 10 trees done in a morning and getting one done in a day. But you know, back on the horse, we're here, we're doing a voiceover, and I hope you've been enjoying it this far. But back onto the tree we're talking about anyway. Like I say, we put some basic movement into it. We won't be using all of it, although I've wired up, you know, a lot further up the tree here. But you know, again, the first kind of part of the bend up, we'll cut it off at some point and create some taper. The shape you actually see here will probably be much of the kind of direction it will be heading in. But the latter half of the tree obviously will get cut off, because we want to create taper. And also, if you're very observant and look at the wiring, the branches aren't exactly where you'd want them on the curves as we go up there, but the bottom of the tree is correct and usable, so that's the part that matters. But this will just get literally jumped up the pot sizes for a couple of years, you know, and grown as big as it can. Yeah, I don't want it to be a massive tree in the end. I just want it to be a bit thicker than it is. So the last little tree that we're going to look at is this Juniper. Again, this featured in a short, I'd say probably two and a half years ago, something like that. It's planted up in one of my little concrete pots. This was just like kind of the waste bucket at the end of the day, and trialing new shapes. Really quite fond of this little pot, to be fair. It was a bit thin on the bottom, so I think it probably will disintegrate in the end. But this has been out for a couple of winters now, and you know, like, I've obviously got a concrete pot making video. I've got a couple of, and you know, a few people doubted whether this, you know, could hold up to a winter, and I can tell you now it's held up to 2 British winters. So yeah, so it's doing all right, you know. And for something that I can make in like an hour or two, you know, out of some cement, which is very, very cheap material, to be honest. So I'm not really doubting the durability of the pots too much. The heat seemed to be more so of a problem than the freeze-thaw action, really. But, you know, like I say, if it lasts another 3-4 years, which I'm sure it will probably last longer than that, but I'm perfectly happy with that for, like I say, an hour or so's mucking around, you know, with a very cheap material. And like I say, the more you make of something like that, the quicker you can do them again. So, you know, in the end, I think it's quite a cost-effective way of just enjoying a cheap plant in a cheap pot, you know, because bonsai can be very expensive, and, you know, it needs to be accessible to everyone. And to be honest, you know, it's what's more priceless, you know, something that you've created, the plant and the pot, or you just bought the whole thing ready to go. You know, even this plant, it was an air layer off of another juniper, so the plant itself was free. The pot probably cost about 30 pence in materials, if that. I think that's well overcooking it, to be honest with you, and a little bit of time, you know, and it was only an evening, so it's yeah, another kind of cool little project, something for nothing. I think this year we'll have to actually, you know, maybe style this thing, because it's just been left unchecked for a couple of years now, but I think it's going to put a little bit of growth on this year and start waking up a bit. I did take a lot of juniper air layers probably 4 or 5 years ago, and with a kind of deciduous mindset in mind, you know, I must reduce a bit of this foliage, take a bit of stress off the tree, you know, how you would with a cutting or a large tree if you moved it, you know, cut some leaves in half or cut some branches off and water it well, and you know, and it's got 2 chances, right? But with junipers, you know, I pruned a little bit too much foliage off. A lot of juvenile foliage then formed, which did keep the trees alive, but there was no vigour in them for a couple of years, so it took a couple of years to wake them back up. But other air layers that I have now since taken from junipers, I've left majority of the foliage on there, and you know, they barely, you know, have a wobble. They just sort of carry on once severed from the parent plant, and begin to push out new growth. I am finding like a very open textured soil, you know, provided it really kind of gets them moving as well. So yeah, I feel like I'm learning a bit about junipers. They're an awkward little thing, but they do hang on. They're not easy to kill. They just sulk for a long time. Well, thanks for stopping by. I hope you've enjoyed the video. It's been good to actually get back in one and talk about the plants and actually be able to share a bit more. You know, I do appreciate that, you know, music slapped over a video and notes, you know, that's not the same thing, is it? You know, you don't get to kind of hear my thoughts and, you know, maybe, you know, myself to express the passion for the trees, if you like. But I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you have, please consider giving us a thumbs up. If you really have hated it, feel free to give it a thumbs down, but you know, if you have enjoyed it, it'd be very helpful if you could give us a thumbs up. It will help grow the channel on a little bit. If you're not subscribed, maybe consider subscribing to the channel, and if you are subscribed, thank you very much for coming back, and I'll see you in the next one.